The Valdez family was sound asleep when the 1978 Dodge Sportsman motorhome rolled up their long, recently paved driveway. The driver had cut off the engine and the headlights and allowed the motorhome to coast quietly to the side of the house. A moment passed and nothing happened. Then 4 men got out of the rusted beater and calmly walked barefoot to the rear of the house. Charlie, the family's Labrador, was the first to take notice, and at the sight of the 4 men approaching the glass door, awoke the household with frantic barking. From outside, the 4 strangers remained still and watched the distressed dog with unhurried amusement. A light flickered on upstairs, and Willie Valdez reached into his nightstand drawer, pulled out a loaded revolver, and rolled out of bed. He told Carla, his wife, to stay where she was and to let him check downstairs before calling the police. He crept into the hall, where his 9-year-old daughter, Haley, waited by her bedroom door, curious as to what all the commotion was about. Charlie barked at just about anyone who stepped onto their property, and the chances of the trespasser being either human or animal were about the same. But when Haley saw the revolver in her father's hand, she began to fear the worst, and tears swelled in her eyes. "It's okay," Willie assured her. "Go to Mom." Haley turned and hurried down the hall to join her mother as Willie began to descend the stairs, all while Charlie continued to bark. Willie reached the bottom of the stairs and then carefully inched his head around the corner and could see that there was a lone dark figure standing right outside the back door, seemingly watching Charlie. If this was someone looking to break in, he was not attempting to do so. It was difficult for Willie to make out the person's appearance in the dark, and he did not want to call the police on a neighbor or, for that matter, the police if that's who this was. Willie stepped down and slowly rounded the corner, the revolver still tightly gripped in his hand. As he did so, the figure lifted his gaze from Charlie. Willie paused. Something was not right. Willie could feel it. Right then, he decided he'd rather call the police on a neighbor and sort out the misunderstanding later than put his family at risk. Willie slunk back around to the stairs, and as he did so, there was a loud crash from a window above, followed by the petrified screams of his wife and daughter. Without hesitating, Willie sprinted up the stairs, taking them 2 at a time. Pumping with adrenaline, Willie had not noticed that Charlie's barking had ceased. Willie scrambled down the hall, and when he reached his bedroom's doorway, he caught a fleeting glimpse of a filthy and bearded, broad-shouldered man tossing Haley out the window into the arms of another below. Carla had been flung from it just prior, and unbeknownst to Willie, had been left to hit the ground, then violently dragged to the motorhome. Willie did not warn the intruder before firing. Instead, he pulled the trigger and let the bullet tear into the man's neck. When the man recoiled against the wall, his hand pressed firmly against his fresh, bleeding wound. Willie did not wait, and as he moved to the window, fired a fatal round into the man's forehead. He peered down just as the motorhome was backing out of sight, leaned out the window, and fired the remaining rounds from the revolver. When the gun clicked empty, Willie instinctively pulled the trigger several more times, then cried out for his wife and daughter. Just as he was about to chance a leap from the window and attempt to take off in pursuit, he was shoved from behind. The snap of his arm chased the fading echo of gunfire and panic. Willie let out a pained and primal wail. The solid thud of the dead stranger colliding with the ground startled him back to sudden silence. He glanced at the filthy, bloodied body, then rolled over enough to catch sight of another man, resemblant of the one now lying next to him, glaring down from the window above. To Willie, the man looked like the embodiment of evil. But there were worse horrors in store for Willie. A nightmare hinted at by the man, who casually leaned out the window, and with a sinister grin, said, "Mama's waitin'."